Hi, I'm Freddie from FT Cartography, and I wanted to take some time to talk about a map I made. I made this last August and posted it on Instagram then, so you may have seen it, but I'm pretty proud of it, so I wanted to actually talk about it. It's inspired by maps from the historical atlas by DK called The History of the World Map by Map. Specifically, I've taken inspiration from the maps of hominid fossil sites and of early human civilizations, which are found at the beginning of the atlas. So I've been inspired by the symbols for hominid fossils, which was a skull in the DK atlas, and also the outreach of human civilizations, which I've also represented here with, coloured boundaries with some fuzziness too. Obviously, this map is not of our world. This is of my world building project, which I've been working on for the past 11 years actually. And the whole world is called Tharr, and this continent is called Psychondral. Even though I've been working on it for 11 years and it has gone through many revisions, from the origin stories to some of the country names to just general history, all of that has changed multiple times, but actually the general outline of the continent of Psychondral has remained pretty much the same. I have added islands up here in northern Dombil. This country in the modern day is Dombil, and I've added these islands down here, the islands of Tharr. I've also named the seas a bit more inspiring names than simply calling this entire area the New Sea. I do quite like the Sonder Sea and the Cape Adon Sea though, so I've kept those all of these years. 11 years they've still been called those things, and so have so many of the countries like Monbel or the Tobonian Islands and Zandu over there. But this map is of my world basically before the arrival of humanity. So in my world building project, humans mysteriously arrive by boat in this area here, which is later called Targard. Humans are led by a man named Yarlif the Explorer. One group of humans. There are actually many places where humans landed, but all by ship. This is because humans are not from this world. They're from another world and were transported here through mysterious means. But the original inhabitants are three sentient species: the giants, the gnomes, and the pukas. They all have varying levels of civilization, which I've tried to show here. So they're all far more giantish kingdoms and empires, like the Jodarak Empire, the Jotamenic Empire, the Aeoltan Kingdom, the Roslip culture, and the Skolvans culture. While there are some gnomish kingdoms like Edlorn, and a kind of civilization like at Naranir, there are also like steppe gnomes living in the deserts and steppes. I think that's kind of interesting. But pukas do not have civilization on the whole, apart from in the Sonder Islands. That's why they're called the Sonder Civilization. All of these people used to control far more, but the limits of these civilizations and empires are down to the limited sources that humanity has. After what I'm not going to skirt it, genocide of these peoples. So this map is meant to be an in-world artifact almost. Like, imagine a DK History Atlas equivalent in my world. This would be one of the first maps in it. Well, the 16th and 17th pages. And it will be drawn from archaeological evidence and also textual evidence too. So I mention in my information on the side here about the songs of Gundalak and how that revealed things about the Jotamenic Empire. I wanted to include some flavor text like that to just sort of convey the idea that these histories are being pieced together by people literally thousands of years after the fact. So I have made maps of all of the human civilizations and kingdoms and empires over the complete timeline from the medieval period, which in this setting was more at the year 0 rather than 500 to 1500 like in our world. But I've gone through all the way to the modern day, and there is a distinct absence of any, well, gnomish or giant kingdoms, and that's unfortunately because humans being humans are very imperialistic. So in my world, humanity arrives in this area, which later becomes known as Tharr, and after a while, the humans here do not like, they don't like each other. They don't like living with each other. So they are led, different groups are led by certain people around the continent. They disperse. So some of these leaders include King Kale, who moves up here to what is later known as Kalegerd, or King Ozar, who moves here, or Karaticus, who goes down here, and Don Eric, who moves west. There are many of these people, many leaders, and many groups of people that just don't want to live under these Targaryen rulers. And that is how this entire continent gets populated, in effect, is a dissemination of humanity from almost one point. Of course, there are a few other places where humanity lands, such as in the far east of this continent here, from the continent of Tharr, which I have recently actually made a detailed map of, because at this time in August, when I made this map, I hadn't fleshed out what Tharr looked like, but now I have. So I haven't updated this map, but I think it's a good piece of how I imagined things last year. And people also landed here in what I later called the Retic countries. I wanted this to be like the Baltics, in the fact that there are many small countries that people often group together as one, even though they have nothing to do with each other culturally, or linguistically in some cases. I think that's kind of interesting. But you may remember, if you follow my Instagram, I have made a map of a crusade against the gnomes of the kingdom of Edelon, led by Tarmo, who was a leading figure in the kingdom of Valdem. So Valdem is around here, near Eichbrook, and that was a Valdic kingdom. So the Valds were one of the first people to establish a kingdom outside of Tharr. They established it down south, near this location of Eichbrook. And they controlled, this kind of blank area that used to be inhabited by Pukas. Unfortunately for the Pukas, they were driven out. But eventually, the humans who lived down here, they did not like being neighbours to the Kingdom of Edelon up here, or to the Eltiat civilization down here. So under Tarmo, several crusades were led that unfortunately led to the complete submission of these gnomic peoples. So we see here, one of the archaeological sites is the Nomsdorf ruins. And if you have seen my map of Tarmo's Crusades, this is actually where the capital of the gnomish kingdom is, which was also named Edelon. And this later becomes known as Nomsdorf, not in honour, but in recognition of its previous status as the gnomish kingdom's capital, There are many other things like this across the whole place, across the whole setting. And yeah, I really enjoyed making this map and fleshing out the different civilizations that were not human. Now, one of the most interesting things to me is the idea that giant nations existed all across these large mountain ranges. And in order to convey that, I needed a way to depict mountain ranges that kind of conform to the way the DK Atlas did. Recently, I've been trying to use the software Wilbur in order to generate more accurate terrain data. that's more akin to like relief or shaded relief you might get from QGIS or something. But in August, I used Maslow's amazing assets to flesh out where the hills and the mountain ranges were. So if you look down here, or over here rather, you can see these northern mountains, which I've used Maslow's assets to depict in a way that's kind of like a shaded relief. I mean, it's not perfect, and that's got nothing to do with Maslow's assets. You know, his assets are amazing. It's just my implementation of them using Inkscape is not the way to do it. Like, that's not the ideal way. The best way to use them is probably with Photoshop, and that's unfortunately not a piece of software that I actually have access to. So instead, I've just been using Inkscape and GIMP2 to actually assemble this map in the end. Another thing that I wanted to also include in this map is the mix of modern day names with assumed or discovered historical names. So things like Wilhelm's Cave, for instance. Wilhelm certainly was not the name of a giant, as you know is depicted here. Wilhelm's Cave is a fossil site of giants. But I wanted to convey that some of these places are named with human historical connotations. So a legend may have surrounded a figure named Wilhelm, who was linked with this cave in some way. Maybe he was actually linked with human sacrifice or the idea of it. And there were tall tales in this locality about Wilhelm throwing people down into this cave. And only in the modern day, when archaeologists are able to look in, they discover that it is a giant fossil site, rather than this thing of conforming to the urban legend. I also wanted to include some interesting connotations to the name. So much like what I just said about Wilhelm's Cave, the Masaski Death Pit is something that is pretty extreme, and just wanted to kind of get across something about the nature of the site and also the nature of like its environment that it's found in. So you got the Cesarev muds. I want that to be kind of like a fen or swampland. You got the Gaustind Mount. That is, a mountain or a peak perhaps. You got places just named Roslip and Skolvans. These are archaeological sites that are found in modern day cities, rather than in, places that were inhabited by, well, they may have been inhabited by giants, but nowadays they're also inhabited by humans. So perhaps, well, not perhaps, in the case of Roslip, this city was built on the ruins of a giant city. And that kind of thing happens in our world. Cities get built on top of ruins all of the time throughout human history. And I wanted to convey that kind of thing with the civilizations that I have depicted here. The giant gnomic civilizations, the Pukas. I'm pretty proud of it, and I just wanted to show it off and just talk about it for a little bit. So thank you so much for taking the time to watch this, and I hope you have a good day. See ya.